Hi everyone and welcome to today's video. A couple of weeks ago I featured a set of inks, the deep red inks from Diamine as bundled up by Pulp Addiction here in Australia, and I've got another one of these videos today. So today I'm looking at this set, which is the Diamine Ink Royal Blue sample package, which is 8 different inks, just bundled up by the retailer Pulp Addiction here in Australia, and put into the 2ml sample vials and put into nice little color sets. And this set, the Royal Blue set, is not Royal Blues in terms of color, but Royal Blues in terms of name. So this is what we have: Imperial Blue, Kensington Blue, Majestic Blue, Presidential Blue, Prussian Blue, Regency Blue from the 150th anniversary set, Royal Blue, and Tudor Blue from the other 150th anniversary set. So these are the samples we've got in this particular set. The set retails in Australia for $22.95 and can be bought from Pulp Addiction. Let's look at them on a couple of different sorts of paper, see a water test, and just give a bit of general information. So what I have here is a Tomo River notebook, and I've done a little swab of each of the inks, and I'll put a color corrected image next to them here as we change ink to ink. So let's start with Imperial Blue. This is a nice blue. It's not as vibrant as, say, an exact Royal Blue. It's got some nice sheen, that sort of goldy, more the goldy end of the ready gold sheen. But it's got some decent shading and seems to perform pretty well. Next is Kensington Blue, which is a much softer blue. It's got a sort of not a pastel sort of color necessarily, but it's a little less saturated, a little less vibrant, and because of that the shading is a little less obvious, but when it does shade, it shades really beautifully, and you get a tiny bit of sheen, but it's not a huge feature of this ink. I just think that sort of more pastel, sort of like matte soft color is one of the highlights of that ink. Majestic Blue is very, very well known. This is one of those inks that is like one of the signature inks from Diamine, I guess you could say. Heavy sheener, super saturated, nice dark vibrant blue. Shading is less in this ink because it is so saturated, but it does shade from a slightly darker to a slightly lighter blue, but it's in that nice dark royal sort of family, if you will. Presidential Blue is much more vibrant. Once again, that gold end of the sheen as opposed to the red end of the sheen, which you can see if I sort of move the page around a little bit. Like, there's red in it, but it's sort of more goldy red. Nice lighter blue, sort of in the mid blue family. Shades really well. You know, some of these inks perform better than others, and like, I think this one doesn't have some of the shading and stuff that a couple of the others have. Next up is Prussian Blue, which is considered by many to be sort of like a grey blue or almost like a very light blue-black. It's an odd sort of blue. Like, the blue doesn't pop on the page. There's a little bit of sheen and stuff like that. It shades relatively well, but it's another one of these sort of less saturated inks, and it goes on a lot darker than it dries. So you get a sense of this ink much more once the ink has actually dried. And also, depending on how ink resistant the paper is, you'll see it looks very different on the other paper. Regency Blue is very rich. This is a very saturated ink, and it's got sort of decent shading. It leans slightly onto the purple end of blue, almost like one of those blurple colors we talk about. Nice dark shading. If you can get shading out of this ink, it looks great, but mostly you just get a very nice sort of darker, very rich blue. Then, the stock standard Royal Blue. And the Diamine Royal Blue is very nice. It performs well, it's safe. All these inks are pretty safe in pens. Like, they're not going to damage any of your pens. Some of the darker shades are going to take a little bit more to clean out of your pen. That is a standard thing with like a more saturated ink. Like Majestic Blue and Regency Blue from this set particularly are going to take a bit more to wash out. But Majestic Blue is probably the only one that might lean towards staining if you leave it in a pen, particularly if the plastic of the pen is not as good quality perhaps as some others, but things like Royal Blue are going to be incredibly safe. There's a lot of pop on the page with this one, a little bit of sheen, but mostly just this lovely pop of vibrant royal blue with some sort of nice pops of shading where the ink pools. The last in the set, and this is one of 150th anniversary ones, is Tudor Blue, which once again leans towards the purple end of blue, but slightly more on the grey purple end. The shading is nice. Like if you look at the swab there, the shading actually is beautiful. Sort of like those darker pooling areas through to the lighter, less saturated sections. It's a beautiful ink. It's a lovely color, but once again, more leaning to the purple grey end of blue than, like, if you look at it alongside royal blue, you really notice how purple grey that is. So this is the inks on Tomoe River paper. Tomoe River paper is very ink resistant. It shows up shading and sheen very, very well. Let's look at it on a couple of other brands of paper just to get a sense of how it looks on Rhodia and some standard office copy paper. I thought we'd start with the copy paper. This is standard reflex 80 GSM copy paper, which is like the stock standard, you know, like middle of the road copy paper here in Australia. This is the same page I did the deep red set on. Why not, you know, double up? So as you can see, the inks all look very different when you see them next to each other, which I think is wonderful. Like, it's a really nice chance to see 8 inks, like in the blue family, next to each other. And that's the beauty of these sample sets, is that it gives you a chance to really try out a range of the inks and pick which ones suit you best. For the most part, Diamine inks perform really well. If we look at the back, this is not fountain pen friendly paper, so you are going to get bleed through. These are all done with a glass dip pen, so you are putting down sort of a decent amount of ink, but you do get, you know, a bit of bleeding happening through here, but that, as I said, is normal on this paper. But what we see occasionally with a few of these inks, particularly Presidential and Kensington, is that we do get some feathering, which, once again, this isn't fountain pen friendly paper, but you can see, for instance, the difference between Majestic, which is a more saturated, perhaps slightly more viscous ink, in comparison to, say, Kensington Blue, that, you know, Majestic holds together better on the page. Kensington does tend to sort of bleed through, as does Presidential there. But, you know, in terms of, like, we lose it on this paper, we lose a lot of the shading, but we do get a sense of the color, and the difference between, say, Regency Blue there, which is that sort of blue purple, and royal blue, becomes very apparent. So this is, as I said, on the copy paper, how they perform and how they look there. Now we have the Rhodia page. Now on this page, I've done a couple of things. Firstly, I've, you know, obviously written with the ink, and I've done a little swab with the ink, but I've also done a little water test, because I think it's important to see how these inks actually hold up to water treatment. So what I did was I dropped some water on there, let it sit for a couple of seconds, swirled it around, and then just like dabbed it up. So if we start at the top here, we have Imperial Blue. Once again, as I said, a very nice sort of warm, rich shade of blue with good shading. Not super water resistant. Well, the ink moves around a lot, but you do keep a little bit of that ink hanging around on the page there. Kensington Blue, which is a more pastel sort of matte blue on the lighter side, shades really nicely on this paper actually. Like, I think the darker shades in there look really nice. A lot of it does get taken up though with the water. Majestic Blue does exactly what you expect it to do. Sheens on just about anything. This is Rhodia, so you would expect it to sheen to some degree. But, you know, it sheens well. It's, you know, shading okay, well, as well as this ink can shade. And in the water, what we see is there's a little bit left behind, but it moves around a lot. This is a saturated ink, so when you rehydrate the ink with water, it just sort of spreads around and moves, which is really great if you're using it for, say, artwork. Not so great if you've got like pages of, you know, important writing that get dunked in water for some reason. Presidential Blue, I think, is one of the ones that performs best in terms of water resistance, simply because it's got a nice sort of dark undertone in there that sort of stays around. Nice shading on the page. It's a nice sort of, you know, as a warm, on the lighter side of some of these inks. If we move to the second half of the page now, we get Diamine Prussian Blue. Now, as I said, it leans very grey, almost as to a sort of a blue-black level. Some water resistance. All these inks have some water resistance to, you know, to some degree, but, you know, once again, a lot of the ink gets taken away and a lot of the depth of the colour gets taken away. With Regency Blue, this is, as I said, another very saturated ink. We didn't see as much movement on this as we saw in, say, Majestic, but it does move around a bit, and you do lose a lot of the definition because of that. But on the page, it looks great. That sort of purpley sort of shading comes through nicely, and it writes very well. I think this is a lovely ink, you know, sort of like in terms of how it feels on the page. Diamine Royal Blue performed better than I thought it would with the water test, to be honest. This isn't a washable Royal Blue in the same way that like a straight up washable blue is, but you know, it moves around a little bit, but we still get a bit of the definition there, and I think it actually just looks great on the page. I think Royal Blue is one of those very vibrant, nice colors that if you're into using blues for everyday writing, this is something that really does pop on the page and sort of show up as quite a vibrant blue. Tudor Blue, once again, that looks more purple on this than it does on Tullamore River, where it brings out more of the purple grey. But it is a nice sort of blue purple. This performed the worst of all of the. This and Kensington Blue are probably the two least water resistant. Still leave a little bit of the definition in a sort of an odd sort of pinky sort of undertone, which comes through in the ink color as well. But you know, I think it does, once again, looks really nice on the page, writes well, and some of that shading is really beautiful. So when we talk about Diamine ink, obviously Diamine are one of the big name brands in ink. They've got one of the largest ranges of colors, and they are really super widely available. And what Pulp Addiction have done is they've become recently just become one of the, this is in September 2020, they've recently become a stocker here in Australia, and have been able to get really great prices. So as I said, this particular sample set costs $22.95, which is a couple of dollars cheaper than buying the samples individually at $2.95 each for the 2 ml sample through Pulp Addiction. And as I said, I think it's a really great chance to actually try out a range of inks, a range of colours in a particular colour family. So blues here, we've had the deep reds, and there's going to be obviously more to come. But if you're interested in Diamine and you're in Australia or anywhere in the world, check out Pulp Addiction because their prices are actually really competitive. So the 30 ml bottle costs $8.95 and the 80 ml bottle costs $19.95, which is, both of those are sort of a handful of dollars cheaper than some of the other stockers here in Australia. And the 80 is particularly great value. I think Diamine inks in general, like if you're buying internationally, there are a number of retailers such as Cult Pens in the UK who, sell these inks at really great prices, and Diamine are really great value. And you also get great performing inks. I forgot to show you the reverse of the rodeo page here. Like nothing comes through. Even with the water test, like we get a little bit of sort of showing through where we did the swabs, but that's laying down a lot of ink. So, I think it's performing, nicely. Nothing comes through in the writing. As I said, on the copy paper stuff comes through, but this is not fountain pen friendly paper. This is your standard printer paper that you might, put in, sort of like a laser printer at the office. And on Tullamore River, like we do have, sort of show through, of course, and some of these swabs come through. But in terms of the writing, nothing comes through, nothing bleeds, nothing feathers, everything looks nice. These are really good quality inks and super safe, as I said. Like we're not talking about inks that are going to ruin pens. These are known to be incredibly safe on pens, and so like this is just from the sample vial here. But if you go to pulpaddiction.com.au, you can see the range of inks there, see what they're doing with them and the prices and stuff. And I think it's really great value. And I love Diamine, and I just think they're wonderful inks. So yeah, check these out. I think I'm really impressed with this this particular set. And it's nice, as I said, to try a few colours in a colour family, but aren't so closely linked. So you can really get a sense of, the differences on the page. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to stay up to date with the videos that I produce. Please feel free to get in touch using any of the platforms listed below. You can find me on Instagram or Twitter at @the_offstage_me, or you can contact me on any of my videos here, or drop me an email, which is also listed down below. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there's a way you'd like to support the channel by sponsoring a review or providing an item for review, I would love to hear from you, so drop me a message and let's see what we can do. In the meantime, enjoy your inks, enjoy your writing, and I'll talk to you soon.